Let all things be done decently and in order. Corinthians 14:40. Throughout this book, we've talked about discovering how people do things. We've stated that people who are able to produce outstanding results consistently produce a set of specific actions, both mental and physical, internal things they do inside their minds and external things they do in the world. If we produce the same actions, we will create the same or similar results. However, there is another factor that affects the results: the syntax of action. The syntax, the way we order the actions, can make a huge difference in the kind of results we produce. What's the difference between "the dog bit Jim" and "Jim bit the dog"? What's the difference between "Joe eats the lobster" and "the lobster eats Joe"? They're very different, particularly if you're Jim or Joe. The words are exactly the same. The difference is syntax, the way they're arranged. The meaning of the experience is determined by the order of the signals provided to the brain. The same stimuli are involved, the same words, yet the meaning is different. This is critical to understand if we are to effectively model the results of successful people. The order in which things are presented causes them to register in the brain in a specific way. It's like the commands to a computer. If you program the commands in the right order, the computer will use all its capabilities and produce the result you desire. If you program the correct commands in a different order, you will not get the outcome you wish. We use the word strategy to describe all these factors, the kinds of internal representations, the necessary submodalities, and the required syntax that work together to create a particular result. We have a strategy for producing just about anything in life: the feeling of love, attraction, motivation, decision, whatever. If we discover what our strategy for love is, for example, we can trigger that state at will. If we discover what actions we take, and in what order, to make a decision, then if we're indecisive, we can become decisive in a matter of moments. We will know which keys to hit and how to produce the results we want in our internal biocomputer. A nice metaphor for the components and use of strategies is that of baking. If someone makes the greatest chocolate cake in the world, can you produce the same quality results? Of course you can, if you have that person's recipe. A recipe is nothing but a strategy, a specific plan of what resources to use and how to use them to produce a specific result. If you believe that we all have the same neurology, then you believe we all have the same potential resources available to us. It is our strategy, that is, how we use those resources, that determines the results we produce. This is the law of business as well. One company may have superior resources, but the company with strategies that best use its resources will usually dominate the marketplace. So what do you need to produce the same quality cake as the expert baker? You need the recipe, and you need to follow it explicitly. If you follow the recipe to the letter, you will produce the same results, even though you may never have baked such a cake before in your life. The baker may have worked through years of trial and error before finally developing the ultimate recipe. You can save years by following his recipe, by modeling what he did. There are strategies for financial success, for creating and maintaining vibrant health, for feeling happy and loved throughout your life. If you find people who already have financial success or fulfilling relationships, you just need to discover their strategy and apply it to produce similar results and save tremendous amounts of time and effort. This is the power of modeling. You don't have to labor for years to do it. What does a recipe tell us that empowers us to take effective action? Well, one of the first things it tells us is what ingredients are needed to produce the result. In the baking of human experience, the ingredients are our five senses. All human results are built or created from some specific use of the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, gustatory, and olfactory representational systems. What else does a recipe tell us that allows us to produce the exact same result as the person who created the recipe? It tells us the amounts we need. In reproducing human experience, we also need to know not only the ingredients, but also how much of each ingredient we need. In strategies, we can think of these submodalities as being the amounts. They tell us specifically how much we need. For example, how much visual input, how bright, how dark, how close is the experience. What's the tempo, the texture? Is that all there is to it? If you know what the ingredients are and how much to use, can you now produce the same quality of cake? No, not unless you also know the syntax of the production, that is, when to do what, and in what order. What would happen if in baking the cake you put in first what the original baker put in last? Would you produce a cake of the same quality? I doubt it. If, however, you use the same ingredients, in the same amounts, in the same sequence, then you will of course produce similar results. We have a strategy for everything, for motivation, for buying, for love, for being attracted to someone. Certain sequences of specific stimuli will always achieve a specific outcome. Strategies are like the combination to the vault of your brain's resources. Even if you know the numbers, if you don't use them in the right sequence, you won't be able to open the lock. However, if you get the right numbers and the right sequence, the lock will open every time. So you need to find the combination that opens your vault and those that open other people's vaults as well. What are the building blocks of syntax? Our sensors. We deal with sensory input on two levels, internal and external. Syntax is the way we put together the blocks of what we experience externally and what we represent to ourselves internally. For example, you can have two kinds of visual experiences. The first is what you see in the outside world. As you read this book and look at the black letters on the white background, you're having a visual external experience. The second is visual internal. Remember when, in the previous chapter, we played with the visual modalities and submodalities in our mind. We really weren't there to see the beach or the clouds or the happy or frustrating times that were represented in our mind. Instead, we experienced them in a visual manner. The same is true of the other modalities. You can hear a train whistle outside your window. That's auditory external. Or you can hear a voice in your mind. That's auditory internal. If the tone of the voice is what is important, that is auditory tonal. If the words meaning conveyed by the voice are what is important, that's auditory digital. You can feel the texture of the armrest of the chair you're sitting in. That's kinesthetic external. Or you can have a deep feeling inside that something makes you feel good or bad. That's kinesthetic internal. In order to create a recipe, we must have a system to describe what to do and when. So we have a notation system to describe strategies. We represent sensory processes in a shorthand notation, using V for visual, A for auditory, K for kinesthetic, I for internal, A for external, T for tonal, and D for digital. When you see something in the outside world, visual external, it can be represented as V. When you have a feeling inside, it's key. Consider the strategy of someone who gets motivated by seeing something big, then saying something to herself, aid, that creates the driving feeling key inside. This strategy would be represented in the following way, aid key. You could talk all day to this person about why she should do something, and it's highly unlikely you'd succeed. However, if you showed her a result and mentioned what she would say to herself when she saw it, you could put that person into state almost on cue. In the next chapter, I'll show you how to elicit strategies that people use in specific situations. For now, I want to show you how those strategies work and why they're so important. We have strategies for everything, representational patterns that consistently produce specific outcomes. Few of us know how to use those strategies consciously, so we go in and out of various states depending on what stimuli hit us. All you need to do is figure out your strategy so you can produce your desired state on cue. And you need to be able to recognize other people's strategies so you can know exactly what they react to. For example, is there a way in which you consistently organize your internal and external experiences to make a purchase? Most definitely. You may not know it, but the same syntax of experiences that attract you to a particular car may also attract you to a particular house. There are certain stimuli that, in the right sequence, will immediately put you in a state that's receptive to buying. We all have sequences we consistently follow to produce specific states and activities. Presenting information in another person's syntax is a powerful form of rapport. In fact, if it's done effectively, your communication becomes almost irresistible because it automatically triggers certain responses. What other strategies are there? Are there persuasion strategies? Are there ways to organize material that you present to someone so that it becomes almost irresistible? Absolutely. Motivation, seduction, learning, athletics, selling. Absolutely. How about depression or ecstasy? Are there specific ways to represent your experience of the world in certain sequences that create those emotions? You bet. There are strategies for efficient management. There are strategies for creativity. When certain things trigger you, you go into that state. You just need to know what your strategy is in order to access a state on cue. And you need to be able to figure out the strategies others use so you can know how to give people what they want. So what we need to find is the specific sequence, the specific syntax that will produce a certain outcome, a certain state. If you can do that and you're willing to produce the action needed, you can create your world as you desire it. Other than the physical necessities of life, like food and water, almost everything else you might want is a state. All you have to know is the syntax, the right strategy for getting yourself there. One very successful modeling experience I had was with the US Army. I was introduced to a general, with whom I began to communicate about optimum performance technologies like NLP. I told him I could take any training program he had, cut the time in half, and even increase the competency of the people in that shorter period of time. Pretty big claim, right? The general was intrigued but not convinced, so I was hired to teach NLP skills. After successful NLP training, the Army gave me a contract to model training programs and simultaneously teach a group of its men how to model effectively. I would be paid only if I produced the results I had promised. The first project they asked me to take on was a 4-day program to teach enlisted men how to effectively and accurately fire a .45 caliber pistol. In the past, an average of only 70% of the soldiers who took the program qualified afterwards, and the general had been told that this was the best that could be expected. At this point, I began to wonder what I had gotten myself into. I had never shot a gun before in my life. I didn't even like the idea of firing one. Originally, John Grinder and I had been partners in the project, so I felt that with his background in shooting, we could work it out. Then, for various scheduling reasons, John suddenly cancelled. Well, you can imagine what happened to my state. In addition, I heard a rumor that a couple of people in the training group were going to do anything they could to sabotage my work because they were angry about the amount of money I was to be paid. They were going to teach me a lesson. With no background in shooting, having lost my ace in the hole, John Grinder, and knowing there were people trying to make me fail, what did I do? First, I took this giant image of failure that I had been creating in my mind and literally shrank it down to size. Then I began to set up a new set of representations about what I could do. I changed my belief systems from, the best in the army can't do what they're asking, so obviously I can't, to, the pistol coaches are the best at what they do, but they know little or nothing about the effect of internal representations on performance or how to model the strategies of the best shooters. Having put myself in a state of total resourcefulness, I informed the general that I would need access to his best shooters so that I could find out specifically what they did in their minds and physical actions that produced the result of effective and accurate shooting. Once I discovered the difference that made the difference, I could teach it to his soldiers in less time and produce the desired results. Along with my modeling team, I discovered the key beliefs that some of the best shooters in the world shared, and I contrasted them with the beliefs of the soldiers who had not shot effectively. Next, I discovered the common mental syntax and strategies of the best shooters and replicated them so I could teach them to a first-time shooter. This syntax was the result of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, of shots and minute changes in their techniques. Then I modeled the key components of their physiology. Having discovered the optimum strategy for producing the result called effective shooting, I designed a 1.5-day course for first-time shooters. The results. When tested in less than 2 days, 100% of the soldiers qualified, and the number who qualified at the highest level, expert, was 3 times higher than after the standard 4-day course. By teaching these novices how to produce the same signals to their brains the experts did, we made them experts in less than half the time. I then took the men I had modeled, the top shooters in the country, and taught them how to enhance their strategies. The result: an hour later, one man scored higher than he had in 6 months, another shot more bullseyes than he had in any competition in recent memory, and the coach gave both of these men a run for their money. In his communication to the general, the colonel called it the first breakthrough in pistol shooting since World War I. The point here is for you to realize that even when you have little or no background information and even when circumstances seem impossible, if you have an excellent model of how to produce a result, you can discover specifically what the model does and duplicate it, and thus produce similar results in a much shorter period of time than you may have thought possible. A simpler strategy is one used by many athletes to model the best in their field. If you wanted to model an expert skier, you might first watch carefully to see what his technique is. As you watch, you might move your body in the same motions until they feel like a part of your key. If you've ever watched skiing, you may have done this involuntarily. When the skier you are watching needs to turn, you turn for him as if you were the one skiing. Next, you would want to make an internal picture of an expert skiing V. You've gone from visual external to kinesthetic external to kinesthetic internal. Then you would make a new visual internal image, this time a disassociated image of yourself skiing V. It would be like watching a movie of yourself modeling the other person as precisely as possible. Next, you would step inside that picture and, in an associated way, experience how it would feel to perform the same action precisely the way the expert athlete did key. You would repeat that as often as it would take for you to feel completely comfortable doing it. Thus, you would have provided yourself with the specific neurological strategy that could help you move and perform at optimum levels. Then you would try it in the real world K. You could map the syntax of this strategy as VK. This is one of hundreds of ways you could model someone. Remember, there are many ways to produce results. There are no right ways or wrong ways, there are only effective or ineffective ways to produce your desires. Obviously, you can produce more precise results by having more accurate and precise information about all the things a person does to produce a result. Ideally, in modeling someone, you would also model his internal experience, belief systems, and elemental syntax. However, just by watching a person you can model a great deal of his physiology. And physiology is the other factor, we'll talk about it in chapter 9, that creates the state we are in and thus the kinds of results we produce. One crucial area where understanding strategies and syntax can make a major difference is teaching and learning. Why can't some kids learn? I'm convinced there are two main reasons. First, we often don't know the most effective strategy for teaching someone a specific task. Second, teachers seldom have an accurate idea of how different kids learn. Remember, we all have different strategies. If you don't know someone's learning strategy, you're going to have a great deal of trouble trying to teach him. For example, some people are lousy spellers. Is it because they're less intelligent than good spellers? No. Successful spelling may have more to do with the syntax of your thoughts, that is, how you organize, store, and retrieve information in a given context. Whether you are able to produce consistent results is simply a matter of whether your present mental syntax supports the task you're asking of your brain. Whatever you've seen, heard, or felt is stored in your brain. Countless research projects have shown that people in a hypnotic trance can remember, that is, access things they were unable to recall consciously. If you are not spelling effectively, the problem is the way you are representing words to yourself. So what's the best strategy for spelling? It's certainly not kinesthetic. It's difficult to feel a word. It's not really auditory, because there are too many words you can't sound out effectively. So what does spelling entail? It entails the ability to store visual external characters in a specific syntax. The way to learn to spell is to make visual pictures that can be easily accessed at any time. Take the word Albuquerque. The best way to learn to spell it isn't to say the letters over and over again, it's to store the word as a picture in your mind. In the next chapter, we are going to learn some of the ways people access the different parts of their brain. For example, Bandler and Grinder, the founders of NLP, discovered that the location we move our eyes to determines which part of our nervous system we have clearest access to. We'll go into these accessing cues in detail in the next chapter. For now, just note that most people remember visual images best by looking up and to their left. The best way to learn to spell Albuquerque is to place the word up and to your left and form a clear visual image of it. At this point I need to add another concept, chunking. Generally, people can consciously process only 5 to 9 chunks of information at once. People who learn rapidly can master even the most complex tasks because they chunk information into small steps and then reassemble them into the original whole. The way to learn to spell Albuquerque is to break it down into 3 smaller chunks like this, Albuquerque. I want you to write the 3 parts on a piece of paper, hold them above and to the left of your eyes, see Albu, then close your eyes and see it in your mind. Open your eyes, see Albu. Do not say it, just see it, then close your eyes and see it in your mind. Continue to do this 4 or 5 or 6 times until you can close your eyes and clearly see Albu. Next, take the second chunk, Qua. Flash on the letters faster and follow the same process with it, and then with the K chunk, until the entire image Albuquerque is stored in your mind. If you have a clear picture, you'll probably have a feeling kinesthetic, it's spelled right. Then you'll be able to see the word so clearly you can spell it not only forward but backward. Try it. Spell Albuquerque. Then spell it backward. Once you have that, you've got that word spelled forever. I guarantee it. You can do that with any word and become a superb speller, even if you've had trouble spelling your own name in the past. The other aspect of learning is discovering other people's preferred learning strategies. As noted above, everyone has a particular neurology, a particular mental terrain they use most often. But we seldom teach to an individual's strength. We assume everyone learns the same way. Let me give you an example. Not long ago, a young man was sent to me. He brought along a 6.5-page report saying he was dyslexic, he couldn't learn to spell, and he had psychological problems at school. I could tell right away that he preferred to process a great deal of his experience kinesthetically. Once I realized how he processed information, I was in a position to help him. This young man had the greatest grasp of the things he felt. However, much of the standard teaching process is visual or auditory. His problem wasn't that he had trouble learning. It was that his teachers had trouble teaching him in a way in which he could effectively perceive, store, and retrieve information. The first thing I did was to take the report and rip it up. "This is a bunch of garbage," I told him. That got his attention. He was expecting the usual battery of questions. Instead, I started talking with him about all the great ways he used his nervous system. I said, "I bet you're good in sports." He said, "Yeah, I'm pretty good." It turned out he was a great surfer. We talked about surfing a little, and he immediately got excited and attentive, in a state of feeling effective. He was in a more receptive state than his teachers had ever seen. I explained to him that he had a tendency to store information kinesthetically and that had great advantages in life. However, his learning style made spelling difficult for him. So I showed him how to do it visually and worked with his submodalities to give him the same feeling about spelling that he had about surfing. Within 15 minutes, I had him spelling like a whiz kid. What about learning disabled kids? Many times, these young people are not so much learning disabled as they are strategy disabled. They need to learn how to use their resources. I taught these strategies to a school teacher who worked with learning disabled kids, ages 11 to 14, who had never scored higher on a spelling test than 70%, most falling in the 25 to 50% range. She quickly realized that 90% of her disabled students had auditory or kinesthetic spelling strategies. Within a week after she began using the new spelling strategies, 19 of 26 kids scored 100%, 2 scored 90%, 2 80%, and the other 3 70%. She says that there has been a major shift in the behavior problems, as if by magic, they've disappeared. She will now be presenting this information to the school board for introduction to all the schools in her district. I'm convinced that one of the greatest problems in education is that teachers don't know the strategies of their students. They don't know the combination to their students' waltz. The combination may be 2 to the left and 24 to the right, and the teacher is trying to use 24 to the right and 2 to the left. Up till now, our educational process has been geared to what students should learn, not how they can best learn it. Optimum performance technologies teach us the specific strategies that different people use to learn and also the best ways to learn a specific subject, such as spelling. Do you know how Albert Einstein was able to conceive the theory of relativity? He said that one crucial thing that helped him was his ability to visualize what it would look like to be riding on the end of a light beam. A person who can't see the same thing in his mind will have trouble learning about relativity. So the first thing he has to learn is the most effective way to run his brain. That's precisely what optimum performance technologies are all about. They teach us how to use the most effective strategies for producing most quickly and easily the results we want. The same problems that we find in education occur in almost every other field. Use the wrong tool or the wrong sequence, and you get the wrong result. Use the right one, and you can work wonders. Remember, we have a strategy for everything. If you're a salesman, would it help to know your customer's buying strategy? You bet it would. If he's strongly kinesthetic, do you want to begin by showing him the beautiful colors of the cars he's looking at? I wouldn't. I'd want to zap him with a strong feeling. I'd want him to sit at the steering wheel, feel the upholstery, hook into the feelings he'd get zooming along the open road. If he were visual, you'd start with the colors and lines and the other visual submodalities that work for his strategy. If you're a coach, would it help to know what motivates different players, what sorts of stimuli work best to get them in their most resourceful states? Would you want to be able to break down specific tasks into their most efficient syntax, just as I did with the best shooters in the US Army? You bet you would. Just as there's a way to form a DNA molecule or a way to build a bridge, there's a syntax that's best for every task, a strategy that people can consistently use to produce the results they want. Some of you may be saying to yourselves, well, this is great if you're a mind reader. But I can't just look at people and figure out their love strategies. I can't speak with someone for a few minutes and know what stimulates him to buy, or to do anything else. The reason you don't know is that you don't know what to look for, or how to ask for it. If you ask for almost anything in the world in the right way, with enough conviction and enough commitment, you'll get it. Some things take great conviction and energy to pursue. You can get them, though you really have to work at them. But strategies are easy. You can elicit a person's strategies in a matter of minutes. In the next chapter we are going to learn ...